The unexpected encounter. The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Dr. Ileana Reeves as she trudged through the dusty expanse of the Sonoran Desert. Her weathered boots kicked up small clouds of sand with each step, a rhythm that had become all too familiar over the past week. As a field biologist specializing in desert ecosystems, Ileana was used to long days under the scorching heat. But this particular research expedition had proven more challenging than most. She paused, wiping sweat from her brow with a bandana, and took a swig from her nearly empty canteen. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the sparse vegetation. It was this solitude that Ileana cherished most about her work, the feeling of being alone with nature, unlocking its secrets one observation at a time. As she scanned the horizon, something caught her eye. A disturbance in the usual pattern of sand and rock, a dark shape that seemed out of place in the monotonous landscape. Curiosity piqued, Ileana adjusted her pack and set off towards the anomaly. Drawing closer, her heart began to race. The shape resolved into a form that defied explanation. It was vaguely humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin shimmered with an iridescent quality that reminded Ileana of fish scales, and its limbs were too long, too graceful to be of this world. What in the world? Ileana murmured, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The creature lay motionless, half buried in the sand. As Ileana approached cautiously, she noticed dark stains on the ground around it, some kind of fluid that she hesitated to call blood. Whatever this being was, it was clearly injured. For a moment, Ileana stood frozen, her mind racing. This was beyond anything she had ever encountered in her years of field research. It challenged everything she knew about life on Earth. Part of her wanted to run, to pretend she had never seen this impossible creature. But a stronger part, the part that had driven her to become a scientist in the first place, urged her forward. Kneeling beside the alien form, Ileana reached out a trembling hand. The skin was cool to the touch, despite the desert heat. She pressed her fingers against what she hoped was a neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint and unlike any rhythm she had felt before, but undeniably present. "You're alive," she whispered, a mix of awe and concern in her voice. "But what are you? And what happened to you?" The alien's eyes suddenly fluttered open, revealing irises of a deep, swirling purple. Ileana gasped, falling backward onto the sand. The creature made a soft, keening sound that tugged at her heart, despite its strangeness. Fear warred with compassion in Ileana's mind. This being was clearly in pain, abandoned and alone in a hostile environment. Whatever it was, wherever it had come from, it needed help. And Ileana realized with a start that she might be its only hope. "Okay," she said, more to herself than to the alien. "Okay, I can do this. First things first, let's get you out of this sun." With gentle hands, Ileana began to clear the sand away from the creature's body. As she worked, she took stock of its injuries. There were deep gashes along its torso and limbs, oozing a silvery fluid that she assumed was blood. One arm was bent at an unnatural angle, likely broken. The alien watched her with those unsettling purple eyes, making no move to resist or flee. Whether this was due to trust or simply a lack of strength, Ileana couldn't tell. She worked quickly, aware that every moment in the oppressive heat could be fatal for this strange visitor. Once she had cleared enough sand, Ileana faced her next challenge, moving the alien to shelter. Her research camp was several miles away, but she knew of a small cave system nearby that would provide immediate refuge from the sun. "I'm going to have to carry you," she told the alien, not sure if it could understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her intentions. "This might hurt, and I'm sorry for that, but I promise I'm trying to help." With a deep breath, Ileana slid her arms under the alien's body and lifted. It was surprisingly light, its frame seeming almost hollow. The creature let out another keening cry, softer this time, as if it was trying to stifle its pain. I know," Eliana soothed, her voice strained with the effort of carrying her unusual burden. "Just hang on. We're going to get you somewhere safe." The journey to the caves seemed to take an eternity. Ileana's arms burned with fatigue, and sweat poured down her face. But she pressed on, driven by a determination she didn't fully understand. This creature's life was in her hands, and she refused to let it down. Finally, mercifully, the dark mouth of the cave came into view. Ileana staggered the last few yards, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately, providing blessed relief from the punishing heat. She laid the alien down on a relatively flat area of the cave floor, then collapsed beside it, gulping in deep breaths of the cool air. For several long moments, they both lay there, two beings from different worlds, united in their struggle for survival in this harsh landscape. As her breathing steadied, Ileana's mind began to race with questions and implications. What was this creature? Where had it come from? And what would happen if anyone else discovered its existence? The weight of the situation settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. "What am I going to do with you?" she asked softly, looking at the alien's pain-filled eyes. The creature made a series of clicks and whistles, a sound unlike anything Ileana had ever heard. She wondered if it was trying to communicate, to answer her question in its own incomprehensible language. With a sigh, Ileana pushed herself to her feet. Whatever came next, her immediate priority was clear. She needed to tend to the alien's injuries. She shrugged off her backpack and began to rummage through it, grateful for her habit of always carrying a well-stocked first aid kit. "I don't know if any of this will work on you," she told the alien as she laid out her supplies. "But it's the best I've got. Let's start with cleaning those wounds." As she worked, applying antiseptic and bandages to the alien's injuries, Ileana's mind whirled with the possibilities and dangers of her situation. She was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze. But this was beyond the realm of science as she knew it. This was first contact, the stuff of science fiction come to life in the most unexpected way. The alien remained still as she worked, its eyes following her every move. Ileana found herself talking to it, explaining what she was doing, asking questions she knew it couldn't answer. It was as much to calm herself as anything else, the sound of her own voice a reminder that this was real, that she wasn't dreaming. "I wonder what your name is," she mused as she finished bandaging the last of the visible wounds. "I can't just keep calling you the alien in my head. How about Lyra? It's a constellation. You know stars. Is that where you're from?" The creature, Lyra, blinked slowly, its head tilting slightly to one side. Ileana chose to take this as acceptance of the name. "Lyra it is, then," she said with a small smile. "Well, Lyra, I've done what I can for now. But we can't stay in this cave forever. I need to get you back to my camp, where I have more supplies. The question is, how?" Ileana sat back, her mind working through the problem. Her research vehicle was parked several miles away, near her main camp. She could make the trek alone in a few hours, but with Lyra, it would be slow going and risky. The desert was unforgiving, and they would be exposed. But as she looked at Lyra, at the trust apparent in those alien eyes, Ileana knew she had no choice. She couldn't abandon this creature, couldn't walk away and pretend this extraordinary encounter had never happened. For better or worse, their fates were now intertwined. "All right," she said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "Here's the plan. We'll rest here for a bit, wait until the worst of the day's heat has passed. Then we'll make for my camp. It won't be easy, but we'll make it. Together." Lyra made another series of clicks and whistles, softer this time. Ileana chose to interpret it as agreement. As the hours passed, Ileana dozed fitfully, one part of her mind always alert for any sign of danger. She shared her meager water rations with Lyra, relieved to see that the alien could at least consume earth water without apparent ill effects. When the light outside the cave began to dim, signaling the approach of evening, Ileana knew it was time to move. She gathered her supplies, her movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling Lyra. "Okay, friend," she said, kneeling beside the alien. "It's time. Are you ready for another trip?" Lyra's response was to extend one long, graceful arm towards Ileana. The gesture was so human, so trusting, that Ileana felt a lump form in her throat. Gently, she helped Lyra to its feet, or what passed for feet on its strange, elongated limbs. Together, they emerged from the cave into the cooling desert air. Ileana supported much of Lyra's weight as they began their slow journey across the sand. The alien was weak, but it was trying to walk, each step a victory against pain and exhaustion. Ileana reached out, her hand hovering over Lyra's shimmering skin. In the dim light of her solar-powered lantern, the alien looked even more otherworldly, more impossible. Yet here it was, real and alive, under her protection. "What have I gotten myself into?" Ileana whispered, a mix of fear and wonder in her voice. But as she looked at Lyra's peaceful face, she knew she wouldn't have it any other way. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they might face, she was committed now to understanding, to protecting, to helping this extraordinary being. With a deep breath, Ileana stood and began to gather her medical supplies. There was still much to be done, many questions to be answered. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel a spark of excitement beneath the worry and exhaustion. She, Dr. Ileana Reeves, field biologist and lifelong seeker of knowledge, had made first contact, and nothing would ever be the same again. A leap of faith. The first rays of dawn were creeping over the horizon when Ileana jolted awake, momentarily disoriented. She blinked, her mind slowly piecing together the events of the previous day. As her eyes fell on the shimmering form of Lyra still asleep on her cot, reality crashed back in full force. "It wasn't a dream," she murmured, a mixture of awe and trepidation washing over her. Quietly, so as not to disturb her alien guest, Ileana rose and stepped outside the tent. The desert was coming alive with the soft chirps of early birds and the rustling of small creatures emerging from their nighttime shelters. She took a deep breath, savoring the crisp morning air, and tried to center herself. The enormity of her situation threatened to overwhelm her. She had brought an alien, an actual, living alien, back to her camp. Every scientific and ethical principle she knew was being challenged. What was the right thing to do? Who, if anyone, should she tell about this extraordinary discovery? A soft whistling sound from inside the tent interrupted her thoughts. Lyra was awake. Ileana ducked back inside to find the alien attempting to sit up, its movements slow and pained. Without hesitation, she moved to help, gently supporting Lyra's back. "Easy there," she said soothingly. "You've been through a lot. How are you feeling?" Lyra's purple eyes fixed on her, swirling with an intensity that made Ileana's breath catch. The alien made a series of clicks and trills, clearly trying to communicate. Though the sounds were meaningless to her, Ileana thought she detected a note of gratitude in them. "You're welcome," she responded, smiling despite her uncertainty. "I'm just glad you're alive, but we've got a lot to figure out." Over the next few hours, Ileana fell into a routine of caring for her unusual patient. She changed Lyra's bandages, marveling at how quickly the alien seemed to be healing. The deep gashes that had marred its iridescent skin were already beginning to close. Feeding Lyra proved to be a challenge. Ileana tried offering various foods from her supplies, but the alien showed no interest in any of them. It was only when she offered some of the native desert plants she had been studying that Lyra perked up, eagerly consuming the tough, fibrous vegetation. "Interesting," Ileana muttered, making mental notes. "Your digestive system must be quite different from ours. I wonder what your home world is like, to produce a being like you." As the day wore on, Ileana found herself talking more and more to Lyra. She explained her research, described Earth's ecosystems, and even delved into human history and culture. Whether the alien understood any of it was unclear, but it seemed to enjoy listening. its head tilted in what Ileana interpreted as curiosity. In turn, Lyra began to make more complex sounds, as if trying to teach Ileana its language. Though the clicks, whistles, and trills remained incomprehensible, Ileana started to detect patterns, variations in pitch and rhythm, that seemed to convey different meanings. If only I had some way to translate, Ileana sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. There's so much I want to ask you, so much I want to understand. As if in response, Lyra slowly raised one of its long arms, pointing towards the sky. Ileana followed the gesture, her eyes widening as she grasped the implication. "You're trying to tell me where you're from?" she asked, excitement building in her voice. "You're from out there, another planet." Lyra nodded, the motion surprisingly human-like. Then, to Ileana's astonishment, the alien began to trace patterns in the air with its finger. As she watched, transfixed, she realized Lyra was drawing constellations, but not any she recognized. "Your star system," Ileana breathed. "You're showing me your home." For the next hour, Ileana scrambled to document everything Lyra showed her, sketching the unfamiliar constellations and noting the patterns of movement the alien used to indicate distance and direction. It was crude astronomy, limited by their lack of common language, but it was more than Ileana had ever dreamed of learning about life beyond Earth. As night fell, bringing with it the chill of the desert air, Ileana found herself facing a dilemma. Her research trip was scheduled to end in 2 days. She was expected back at the university, where she had classes to teach and a mountain of data to analyze. But how could she leave now, with Lyra still recovering and so much left to discover? "I can't just abandon you," she told the alien as she stoked their small campfire. "But I can't stay out here indefinitely either. Someone will come looking eventually." Lyra, who had been watching the fire with evident fascination, turned its gaze to Ileana. There was something in those swirling purple eyes, a depth of intelligence, a hint of shared worry, that made Ileana's decision for her. "Okay," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, we pack up camp. I'll drive us back to my home in Tucson. It's not ideal, but it's the best option we have right now. We can figure out our next steps from there." The alien tilted its head, and Ileana could have sworn she saw a flicker of relief pass over its features. The next morning was a flurry of activity as Ileana broke down her camp, all while trying to keep Lyra hidden from view. She knew it was unlikely anyone else would stumble upon them out here, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Loading Lyra into her beat-up research vehicle proved to be a challenge. The alien's long limbs didn't quite fit comfortably in the passenger seat, and Ileana ended up having to recline it fully, creating a makeshift bed. "I'm sorry it's not more comfortable," she apologized as she helped Lyra settle in. "It's not a long drive, I promise." As they set off across the desert, Ileana couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Here she was, a field biologist whose most exciting discovery before this had been a new species of desert moss, now driving an alien across Arizona. Life, she reflected, had a way of taking unexpected turns. The drive was uneventful, for which Ileana was intensely grateful. She had draped a blanket over Lyra, hoping that a casual observer would mistake the alien for a sleeping human passenger. Still, her heart raced every time they passed another vehicle on the highway. It was late afternoon by the time they reached the outskirts of Tucson. Ileana's small house, tucked away on a quiet street near the university, had never looked so welcoming. As she pulled into the driveway, she let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We made it," she told Lyra, reaching over to give the alien's arm a gentle squeeze. "Welcome to your temporary home on Earth." Getting Lyra inside without being seen by her neighbors required some creative maneuvering and a bit of luck. But soon enough, they were safely inside, the doors locked and curtains drawn against prying eyes. Ileana helped Lyra settle onto her couch, then collapsed into a nearby armchair, the events of the past few days finally catching up with her. She looked at the alien, this impossible, wonderful being that had dropped into her life and changed everything, and felt a surge of protectiveness. "I don't know what's going to happen next," she said softly. "I don't know how long you'll need to stay here or what dangers we might face. But I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and to help you, whatever it takes." Lyra's response was to reach out one long, graceful arm, its hand hovering just above Ileana's. After a moment's hesitation, Ileana bridged the gap, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that transcended species. In that moment, as human and alien touched, Ileana felt a profound shift in her understanding of the universe. The boundaries she had always perceived, between Earth and space, between human and other, seemed to blur and fade. She was connected now to something greater, something that spanned the stars themselves. A soft chime from her computer interrupted the moment. Ileana reluctantly pulled away from Lyra, moving to check her emails. Her heart sank as she read the latest message from her department head, asking for an update on her research and reminding her of the faculty meeting scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Reality was intruding on the bubble of discovery and wonder she had been living in. Ileana knew she would have to make some difficult decisions soon. How could she balance her responsibilities to her job, to science, to humanity as a whole, with her commitment to Lyra? As she pondered these questions, a movement caught her eye. Lyra had managed to stand and was now moving slowly around the living room, examining everything with evident curiosity. The alien paused in front of Ileana's bookshelf, its fingers gently tracing the spines of her biology textbooks and field guides. Watching Lyra explore, Ileana felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just an extraordinary scientific discovery. It was a chance for understanding, for bridging the gap between worlds. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew in her heart that she had made the right choice in helping Lyra. "Let's take this one step at a time," she said, more to herself than to the alien. "First, we need to make sure you're fully healed. Then we'll figure out how to share your existence with the world, or if we even should." Lyra turned to look at her, those mesmerizing purple eyes seeming to convey a depth of emotion that needed no translation. Trust, gratitude, and perhaps a hint of fear, all mirrored Ileana's own complex feelings. As night fell over Tucson, Ileana settled in for what she knew would be a long vigil. There were 1,000 questions to be answered, 1,000 problems to be solved. But for now, in the quiet of her living room, with an alien from beyond the stars as her companion, Dr. Ileana Reeves allowed herself to feel the pure, unadulterated thrill of discovery. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential dangers and ethical dilemmas. But Ileana was committed now, bound by a promise made under the vast desert sky. Whatever came next, she and Lyra would face it together, a testament to the power of compassion and the limitless potential of human curiosity. Hunters in the shadows. The next few days passed in a blur of activity and cautious exploration. Ileana found herself constantly amazed by Lyra's rapid healing and insatiable curiosity. The alien seemed to absorb information at an astonishing rate, quickly grasping the basics of human technology and customs simply by observing Ileana's daily routines. Communication remained a challenge, but they were making progress. Ileana had begun to recognize certain patterns in Lyra's clicks and whistles, associating them with basic concepts like food, water, and rest. In turn, she was teaching Lyra simple English words, marveling at how quickly the alien picked them up. It was on the 4th day of their cohabitation that everything changed. Ileana had just returned from a brief, nervous trip to the grocery store, her arms laden with bags of fresh produce that Lyra seemed to prefer. As she entered the house, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Lyra was huddled in the corner of the living room, its iridescent skin pulsing with a dull, ominous light. The alien's eyes were wide with what Ileana now recognized as fear. "Lyra," she called softly, setting down the groceries and approaching slowly. "What's wrong?" The alien looked at her, then pointed urgently at the window. A series of rapid clicks and whistles followed, more frantic than any communication they'd shared before. Ileana's heart began to race. She moved to the window, carefully peering out through a gap in the curtains. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just her quiet suburban street bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. But then, a movement caught her eye. A sleek black vehicle was parked across the street, its windows tinted so dark they were nearly opaque. As she watched, the driver's door opened and a figure stepped out. The person, if it was a person, was tall and moved with an unnatural fluidity that sent a chill down Ileana's spine. "Oh God," she whispered, stumbling back from the window. She turned to Lyra, her mind racing. "They're here for you, aren't they? The ones who hurt you?" Lyra nodded, a motion that looked painfully human in its desperation. The alien made a sweeping gesture with its arm, then pointed to itself and shook its head vigorously. Ileana's scientific mind kicked into overdrive, interpreting the gestures. "Many of you, but you're not with them. You're running from them." Another nod, accompanied by a soft, mournful trill. The pieces began to fall into place. Lyra wasn't just a lost traveler or an accidental visitor. The alien was a fugitive, fleeing from its own kind for reasons Ileana could only guess at. There was no time to dwell on the implications. The figure from the car was now moving towards her house, its gait smooth and purposeful. Ileana knew they had only moments to act. "We have to go," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Now, is there anything they can track you with? Any technology or, I don't know, energy signature?" Lyra shook its head, then gestured to the wounds that were still healing on its body. Ileana understood. The crash had destroyed whatever devices the alien might have carried. "Okay, good. That buys us some time." Ileana's mind raced through their options. They couldn't stay here. Her house would be the first place they'd look. They needed to get somewhere remote, somewhere she could figure out their next move. A plan began to form. "The university," she muttered. "My lab. It's secure, and I have access 24/7. We can hide there while I figure out what to do." Lyra tilted its head, clearly not understanding all the words but seeming to grasp the urgency of the situation. Ileana grabbed her emergency backpack, a habit from her field research days that now seemed providential, and quickly stuffed it with some of Lyra's preferred foods and a few essential supplies. Then she helped the alien to its feet. "We're going to have to be fast and quiet," she explained, leading Lyra to the back door. "Stay low and follow my lead." They slipped out into the gathering twilight, keeping to the shadows of the fence line. Ileana's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would give them away. But somehow they made it to her car without being spotted. As they pulled out of the driveway, Ileana caught a glimpse of the figure in her rearview mirror. It was standing on her front porch, its hand raised as if about to knock. The sight sent a fresh wave of fear through her. "Hold on," she told Lyra, then floored the accelerator. The drive to the university was tense, every set of headlights in the mirror a potential threat. Ileana took a circuitous route, doubling back and making random turns to throw off any possible pursuit. Lyra remained silent beside her, but its presence was a constant reminder of the incredible situation they were in. Finally, the familiar buildings of the university came into view. Ileana parked in a secluded lot near the biology building, then helped Lyra out of the car. The campus was quiet at this hour, with only a few late-night students milling about. Using her keycard, Ileana led them through a series of corridors and secured doors, finally arriving at her lab. Once inside, she locked the door and let out a long, shaky breath. "We should be safe here, at least for now," she said, helping Lyra settle onto a lab stool. "I don't think they know about this place." As the immediate danger passed, the reality of their situation began to sink in. Ileana leaned against her lab bench, her mind whirling with questions and fears. She looked at Lyra, seeing the alien in a new light. "I think it's time you told me everything," she said softly, "or as much as you can. Who are you really, Lyra? What are you running from?" Lyra's eyes seemed to darken, swirling with emotions Ileana couldn't begin to decipher. The alien was silent for a long moment, then began to make a series of complex gestures and sounds. It pointed to the stars, then to itself, then made a motion like something breaking apart. Slowly, using a combination of their emerging shared language and improvised sign language, Lyra began to tell its story. Ileana listened, her scientific mind working overtime to interpret and understand. From what she could gather, Lyra's species was engaged in some kind of internal conflict. There were two factions, one that sought to explore and connect with other intelligent life in the galaxy, and another that viewed all other species as potential threats to be studied and, if necessary, eliminated. Lyra, it seemed, was part of a group of explorers sent to make peaceful contact with Earth. But they had been betrayed, their mission sabotaged by the isolationist faction. The crash in the desert wasn't an accident. It was an attempt to kill Lyra and its fellow explorers before they could make contact. "So the ones after you, they're like an enforcement arm?" Ileana asked, trying to piece it all together. "They want to make sure no one interferes with other worlds." Lyra nodded, then made a gesture that Ileana had come to associate with danger or threat. "And if they find you, find us. They'll kill us both to keep Earth in the dark." It wasn't a question, but Lyra nodded again, its eyes filled with sorrow and determination. Ileana felt the weight of this new knowledge settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just harboring a lost alien anymore. She was caught in the middle of an interstellar conflict, one that could have profound implications for all of humanity. "We can't let them win," she said, her voice firm despite the fear churning in her gut. "Your people, the ones who want to connect with other worlds, they're right. This kind of discovery, this connection between species, it's too important to lose." Lyra reached out, placing one of its long-fingered hands on Ileana's arm. The touch was cool and strange, but comforting. In that moment, Ileana felt the enormity of what they were facing, but also the incredible potential of what they could achieve. "Okay," she said, squaring her shoulders. "We need a plan. We need to find a way to contact your allies, to let them know you're alive and what's happening here. And we need to do it without alerting the hunters or causing a panic here on Earth." As she spoke, Ileana's mind was already racing through possibilities. Her lab equipment, designed for analyzing biological samples and genetic material, might be repurposed to create some kind of communication device. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "It won't be easy," she told Lyra, managing a small smile. "But then again, nothing worth doing ever is right." Lyra's response was a series of soft, melodic trills that Ileana chose to interpret as agreement and maybe even hope. As the night deepened outside the lab windows, Ileana and Lyra set to work. They were an unlikely pair, a human biologist and an alien fugitive. But together, they represented a bridge between worlds, a chance for understanding and connection that transcended the vast distances of space. The hunters were out there, searching for them in the shadows. But in this quiet lab, illuminated by the glow of computer screens and the soft bioluminescence of Lyra's skin, a spark of hope for the future of both their species began to grow. Ileana knew that the coming days would be filled with danger and difficult choices, but as she looked at Lyra, at this extraordinary being who had crash-landed into her life and changed everything, she felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, for the sake of both their worlds and for the promise of a future where the stars themselves were no longer a barrier between intelligent life. The hunters might be closing in, but Ileana and Lyra were no longer prey. They were pioneers on the brink of the greatest discovery in human history, and they were ready to fight for it. Unveiling truths. The next few days were a blur of feverish activity. Ileana's lab, once a sanctuary of orderly scientific inquiry, had transformed into a chaotic workshop of interstellar communication attempts. Equipment meant for analyzing microscopic organisms was now being repurposed in ways its designers had never imagined. Lyra proved to be far more than just a fugitive. As they worked together, Ileana began to glimpse the true depth of the alien's knowledge and abilities. Lyra's understanding of physics and biology seemed to operate on a level that made Earth's most advanced theories look primitive by comparison. It's like you're able to manipulate energy and matter on a quantum level, Ileana marveled as she watched Lyra coax impossibly complex patterns of light from a modified spectrometer. Is this common among your people? Lyra's response was a series of clicks and whistles that Ileana was beginning to understand as a negation. The alien then pointed to itself, made a gesture Ileana associated with few or rare, and then mimicked the light manipulation again. You're special even among your own kind, Ileana realized. Is that why the isolationists are so afraid of you making contact with other species? Because of what you can do? A solemn nod from Lyra confirmed her suspicion. Ileana felt a chill run down her spine as she considered the implications. The hunters weren't just trying to prevent cultural contamination. They were trying to contain abilities they saw as too dangerous to share. As they worked, Ileana found herself opening up to Lyra, sharing stories of her life, her hopes, and her fears. Despite the language barrier, she felt a deepening connection with the alien. Lyra listened with rapt attention, occasionally making sounds or gestures that Ileana interpreted as questions or encouragement. You know, Ileana said one evening as they took a break from their work, when I was a little girl, I used to dream about moments like this, meeting beings from other worlds, learning about the universe. But I never imagined it would be so. She trailed off, searching for the right word. Lyra tilted its head, waiting. Intimate, Ileana finished. I thought first contact would be some grand official thing. Governments and diplomats and all that. I never thought it would be just this. You and me, hiding in a lab, trying to save both our worlds. Lyra's eyes swirled with a depth of emotion that needed no translation. The alien reached out, gently touching Ileana's hand. A soft warmth spread from the point of contact, and suddenly, Ileana's mind was filled with images and sensations not her own. She saw glimpses of a world with twin suns, felt the exhilaration of soaring through star-filled skies, experienced the wonder of discovering new life on distant planets. But beneath it all was a current of loneliness, of being different, set apart even among one's own kind. As the vision faded, Ileana found herself gasping, tears streaming down her face. Lyra, she whispered, was that you? Your memories? The alien nodded, its own eyes glistening with what Ileana now recognized as their species' equivalent of tears. That's incredible, Ileana breathed. You're telepathic. You can share experiences, memories. Is this how your people communicate? Lyra made a gesture that Ileana had come to understand as sometimes or partially. Then the alien pointed to its head, to Ileana, and made a linking motion with its long fingers. You're saying, we're linked now, that this ability is stronger with me. Ileana's scientific mind raced with the possibilities, even as her emotions swirled with the intimacy of what she'd just experienced. Before Lyra could respond, a sharp beeping cut through the air. Both of them turned to the jury-rigged communication device they'd been working on. A light was flashing, indicating an incoming signal. It worked, Ileana gasped, rushing to the device. We're actually picking up something. As she adjusted dials and Lyra manipulated energy fields around the machine, a voice crackled through, distant and distorted, but unmistakably not of Earth origin. The language was unlike anything Ileana had ever heard, full of musical tones and rhythmic pulses. Lyra's reaction was immediate. The alien's skin began to pulse with bioluminescent patterns, and it responded to the voice with an urgent series of clicks and whistles. Your people? Ileana asked, her heart racing. The other explorers. Lyra nodded, its movements excited but tinged with what Ileana sensed was worry. The alien gestured to the device, then to the sky, then made a motion like something closing in. They're coming, Ileana realized. But so are the hunters. We've just lit up a beacon, haven't we? Another nod from Lyra, this one grave. Ileana's mind raced through their options. They couldn't stay at the lab. It was only a matter of time before the hunters traced the signal. But where could they go that would be safe, yet still allow them to maintain contact with Lyra's allies? As if in answer to her unspoken question, the door to the lab burst open. Ileana whirled, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting to see the ominous figures of the alien hunters. Instead, she found herself face to face with Dr. Marcus Chen, her department head. "Dr. Reeves," he said, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and confusion. "I think it's time you explained what exactly is going on here. And who, or what, is that?" For a moment, Ileana stood frozen, caught between the urge to protect Lyra and the realization that they desperately needed help. Then, making a split-second decision that she hoped she wouldn't regret, she stepped aside, fully revealing Lyra to her colleague. "Dr. Chen," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I'd like you to meet Lyra. She's not from around here, and we're in a lot of trouble." Dr. Chen's eyes widened as he took in the sight of Lyra, the alien's iridescent skin still pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. For a long moment, the only sound in the lab was the soft beeping of the communication device. Then, to Ileana's surprise, a slow smile spread across Dr. Chen's face. "Dr. Reeves," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "I always knew your research would lead to groundbreaking discoveries. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined." Relief washed over Ileana, but it was short-lived. The urgent beeping of their makeshift communicator reminded her of the danger they were in. "Dr. Chen, I promise I'll explain everything," she said quickly, "but right now we need to move. There are others coming, dangerous others, and they can't find us here." To his credit, Dr. Chen didn't hesitate. "My private research facility," he said, already moving to help gather their equipment. "It's off the grid, shielded against most forms of detection. If we're going to hide an alien and continue, whatever it is you're doing here, that's our best bet." As they hurriedly packed up their vital equipment, Ileana felt a mix of gratitude and trepidation. They had an ally now, someone with resources that could prove crucial in the coming days. But they had also taken an irrevocable step. There was no going back now, no pretending that the world hadn't fundamentally changed. Lyra, sensing Ileana's turmoil, reached out to touch her arm. Once again, that wave of warmth flowed between them, carrying with it a sense of determination and hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they loaded the last of their equipment into Dr. Chen's car, Ileana caught a glimpse of movement at the far end of the parking lot. A sleek black vehicle was pulling in, its windows tinted to near opacity. "We need to go," she said urgently, ushering Lyra into the back seat and throwing a blanket over the alien. Now, Dr. Chen didn't ask questions. He gunned the engine, peeling out of the parking lot just as the doors of the black vehicle began to open. As they sped through the night, Ileana's mind raced with possibilities and dangers. They had made contact with Lyra's allies, but they had also alerted the hunters to their location. They had gained a powerful ally in Dr. Chen, but they had also exposed their secret to the wider world. The game had changed, the stakes raised. As the lights of the city faded behind them, and the dark expanse of the desert loomed ahead, Ileana knew that they were racing not just for their own lives, but for the future of two worlds. The truth was unveiling itself, layer by layer, but with each revelation came new dangers, new complexities. Ileana glanced back at Lyra, hidden beneath the blanket, and then at Dr. Chen, his face set with determination as he drove. "Whatever happens," she thought, We're in this together now. For better or worse, this is our fight. As they drove into the unknown, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging the momentous events unfolding beneath them. Somewhere up there, Lyra's people were coming. But so were the hunters. And caught in the middle was a small group of humans, and one extraordinary alien, carrying with them the hope for a new era of interstellar understanding, if only they could survive long enough to see it realized. A new beginning. The journey to Dr. Chen's private research facility was tense, every set of headlights in the rearview mirror a potential threat. Ileana sat in the back with Lyra, the alien's cool hand clasped in hers, a silent communication of mutual support and shared anxiety. As they drove deeper into the desert, Dr. Chen filled the silence with questions. Ileana answered as best she could, marveling at how easily her colleague accepted the extraordinary situation they found themselves in. "You know," Dr. Chen said as they turned onto a barely visible dirt road, "I always believed we weren't alone in the universe. But I never thought I'd be involved in first contact, or that it would be quite so clandestine." Ileana managed a wry smile. "Believe me, this isn't how I imagined it either." The facility, when they finally reached it, was a surprise. From the outside, it looked like little more than a large storage shed. But as Dr. Chen led them inside and activated the lights, Ileana gasped. The interior was a state-of-the-art laboratory, filled with equipment that put their university resources to shame. "Welcome to my pet project," Dr. Chen said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Funded by private grants and kept off the books. I've been conducting my own SCTI research here for years." As they unloaded their equipment and got Lyra settled, Ileana felt a surge of hope. With these resources at their disposal, perhaps they stood a chance after all. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to establish a more stable communication link with Lyra's allies. The aliens' abilities, combined with Dr. Chen's advanced equipment, allowed them to make significant progress. It was on the fourth day that everything changed. As Ileana adjusted the communication array, a clear, strong signal broke through. The voice that emerged was unlike anything they had heard before, melodic, multi-toned, and unmistakably alien. Lyra's reaction was immediate. The alien's skin pulsed with patterns of light, and it responded with a series of complex whistles and clicks. As Ileana and Dr. Chen watched in awe, a holographic image flickered to life above their makeshift console. The being displayed in the hologram was similar to Lyra in basic form, but larger, its skin shimmering with more complex patterns. It spoke again, and this time, to Ileana's amazement, she could understand the words. "Lyra, child of the stars," the voice said. "We have found you at last." Ileana looked at Lyra in surprise. You're translating for us, aren't you?" Telepathically. Lyra nodded, then turned back to the hologram. Through their telepathic link, Ileana and Dr. Chen could understand the conversation that followed. The being introduced itself as Zareth, leader of the exploration faction of Lyra's people. It explained that they had been searching for Lyra since the sabotage, fearing the worst. "The isolationists have gone too far," Zareth said, its tone grave. "Their fear threatens not only our future but the future of countless species across the galaxy. We cannot allow them to succeed." As they spoke, Ileana felt a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. She glanced at the security monitors Dr. Chen had set up, and her heart sank. Several black vehicles were approaching the facility. "They found us," she said, her voice tight with fear. Dr. Chen moved quickly, activating the facility's defense systems. "We need more time," he said urgently. "Lyra, can your people get here?" Before Lyra could respond, the building shook with a tremendous impact. Alarms blared as the hunters began their assault. What followed was a desperate battle of wits and technology. Dr. Chen's defenses held initially, but the hunters' weapons were unlike anything Earth had seen. They seemed to phase through solid matter, disrupting energy fields and shorting out electronics. Ileana, Dr. Chen, and Lyra fought back as best they could. Lyra's abilities proved invaluable, the alien able to counter some of the hunters' advanced technology through sheer force of will. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. As a section of wall crumbled, revealing the menacing figures of the hunters, Ileana felt a moment of pure despair. Had they come so far, only to fail at the final hurdle? But then, just as all seemed lost, the sky above them erupted with light. A ship, vast and beautiful, shimmering with the same iridescent quality as Lyra's skin, appeared as if from nowhere. The hunters faltered, clearly caught off guard by the arrival of Lyra's allies. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra acted. The alien's eyes blazed with an inner light, and suddenly every piece of technology in the area, human and alien alike, went dead. In the sudden silence, Lyra's voice, not spoken, but projected directly into their minds, rang out clear and strong. "Enough," the alien said. "This conflict ends now." The hunters, their weapons useless, found themselves facing not just Lyra, but Ileana and Dr. Chen as well. The two humans stood tall, their faces set with determination, flanking their alien friend. "You came here out of fear," Lyra continued, addressing the hunters. "Fear of the unknown, fear of change. But look around you. Look at these humans who took in a stranger from the stars, who risked everything to help me. This is what awaits us out there. Not just danger, but friendship, understanding, growth." As Lyra spoke, more ships appeared in the sky. But they weren't just Lyra's allies. Ileana recognized the markings of human aircraft as well. The military had finally caught up to the situation. For a tense moment, it seemed as though this scene might erupt into chaos. But then, incredibly, one of the hunters stepped forward. It removed its helmet, revealing a face similar to Lyra's, though marked with lines of stress and worry. "Perhaps," the hunter said, its voice rough with emotion, "we have been wrong. Perhaps there is another way." What followed was beyond anything Ileana could have imagined. As human military personnel surrounded the area, as more of Lyra's people descended from their ships, a dialogue began. It was hesitant at first, filled with mistrust on all sides. But slowly, carefully, understanding began to grow. Ileana found herself at the center of it all, translating and mediating with Lyra's help. Dr. Chen's scientific expertise proved invaluable in explaining human technology and culture to the aliens. As the sun rose on a new day, Ileana stood with Lyra and Dr. Chen, watching as human and alien delegations began the long, complex process of official first contact. "It's really happening," Ileana breathed, scarcely able to believe it. "We did it." Lyra's hand found hers, that now familiar warmth spreading between them. Through their link, Ileana felt the alien's mix of joy, relief, and anticipation for the future. Dr. Chen chuckled softly beside them. "You know," he said, "when I imagined first contact, I always thought it would be more formal. Diplomats in suits, official proclamations, that sort of thing. I never imagined it would start with a biologist finding an injured alien in the desert." Ileana smiled, squeezing Lyra's hand. "Maybe that's exactly how it needed to happen," she said. "Not governments or militaries, but just people, connecting, helping each other." As they watched the scene before them unfold, Ileana knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, cultural misunderstandings to navigate, technological exchanges to manage, the isolationist faction to contend with. But for the first time, she felt truly optimistic about the future. Humanity had taken its first real steps into a larger universe, and they had done so not through conquest or fear, but through compassion, curiosity, and the simple act of reaching out to help someone in need. Lyra turned to Ileana, those mesmerizing purple eyes swirling with emotion. "Thank you," the alien said, the words resonating in Ileana's mind. "For everything." Ileana smiled, feeling the weight of the moment, the enormity of what they had achieved together. "No," she said softly. "Thank you for showing us that we're not alone, for giving us a chance to be part of something greater." As the new day dawned, bringing with it the promise of an interstellar future, Ileana, Lyra, and Dr. Chen stood together, a symbol of what could be achieved when different worlds reached out to one another in friendship and understanding. The story of humanity's first contact with alien life hadn't gone according to any script or prediction. It had been messy, dangerous, and deeply personal. But perhaps that was what made it so profoundly human. And now, as two species began the delicate dance of getting to know one another, Ileana knew that the real adventure was just beginning. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if in approval. A new chapter in the history of both Earth and Lyra's world was opening. And Ileana, once a simple field biologist, now found herself at the forefront of the greatest journey her species had ever undertaken. As delegations mingled and the first tentative steps of diplomatic relations were established, Ileana felt a surge of pride and hope. They had done more than just save Lyra or protect Earth. They had opened a door to a future filled with endless possibilities. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles to overcome, prejudices to dismantle, and new challenges to face. But as Ileana looked at Lyra, at Dr. Chen, and at the mixed group of humans and aliens beginning to work together, she knew that they were ready. This was more than just first contact. It was a new beginning for both their worlds. And together, they would shape the future of the galaxy.